All right. Well, shall we move into our review of the week? This week, we are reviewing a game all the way back from 2011. My second year in the hobby. This was the new hotness when I came into this world of board games that I love so much. Oh wait, what am I talking about? Not 2011. This is 2008. This was a 2-year-old game by the time I get in. I'm so sorry. No, I was thinking of something else. This is 2008. Right. So it was 2 years old when I came into this hobby in mid 2010. This is, of course, Uwe Rosenberg, artist Clemens Franz, Lookout Games. And it is a 1 to 5 player game. I believe the only other game that plays past 4 players in Uwe's big box repertoire is Newsford. Playtime is about 30 minutes to 150 minutes. This is a 3 to 4 hour game if you're playing with a full table. And I wouldn't wildly recommend this at 5. 2 to 4 is right where you want to be. It's got a weight, according to BGG, of 3.74, which is about right. I would say, to me personally, this is one of the heavier Uvas, if not the heaviest, in terms of strategic depth and in terms of rules overhead and understanding how the cards work together. That's basically it. I mean, before we move into everybody talking about it, this is a game about a French harbor, hence Le Havre. You are shipping goods. You are collecting things, buying boats, putting them on boats, selling the boats, building buildings. This is not a farming game. This is one of the rare non-farming Uwe themes. Even a game like Newsford has some farming and stuff going. You're clearing forests and things. There is no forest clearing in this game. You don't have your own little world that you're building that's beautiful. You are all working on this harbor and building buildings along this harbor, and it all takes place on the harbor. Dimitri, let's start with you. Why did you pick Le Havre as the game you wanted to review today?
Many reasons. One, I found myself recommending it to people suddenly. Two, when I came up with the theme for the episode, I realized that when Paul and you got to know each other at Tom's Game Night, we were playing Le Havre religiously. Like almost every time we met, which we never did again. And I thought that Le Havre is a beautiful example of exactly the kind of game that we formed the group around and we solidified around. The other thing that I feel about it is that it is thematically the most coherent Uwe Rosenberg game, in that you feel that the actions, what you're doing, makes sense with the story. And it's also an example of co-opetition, where uniquely it's not in Agricola, it's not in a lot of other Rosenberg games, but you're just waiting for one of your fellow players to build a workshop of some kind, or a wharf, or a loading dock that you can use it. And at the same time, it becomes what Tom calls a knife fight in a telephone booth, when you're trying to use it before somebody else can steal it from you. And the choices that you make affect your other players positively and negatively in a way that is as involved and interesting as I've seen in a Euro of a parallel play where you're trying to build your own universe and you're not actually killing the other people.
That's all perfectly said. Let's go to our resident Uwe Rosenberg expert, and probably the best Le Havre player of the 4 of us here.
Thank you.
Trey,
I'm right here.
Can you imagine?
I thought it was my
Trey,
turn.
Will you just give us a mechanical breakdown of this game, what it's like to play, how it plays, how it differs from other Uwe games, and then we're going to go to Paul afterwards to tell us what it feels like to play this. But we'd love to hear from you on what the hell this game is.
Yeah, this game it does
still occupy a somewhat unique place in that there's certain things in the game which you find in other games, but I don't feel like there's too many games that are exactly like it. I'm struck that this feels to me now like clearly like almost like a reaction to Agricola, where he took the criticisms of Agricola and tried to address some of them. So like in this game, we're all kind of playing like merchants or captains of industry in Le Havre, and we're kind of competing. We're doing different things. Like on your turn, we have kind of like, I think this would qualify as mini
I
turns, to
agree.
use
I
kind of
agree.
Absolutely.
Jennifer's terminology. The turns are pretty small and incremental, and we're either on our turn grabbing resources from what's called a tender. And this would seem somewhat familiar if you played Agricola, where you can grab wood or clay, and they're kind of slowly building up over time until one of us takes them, and then they go down to zero, and then they'll have to build up again. So the decision is often like, what does this resource have to get to when it then becomes worth one of my precious turns in order to grab something? So that's, especially early on in the game, this is one of the main things we're doing is just grabbing resources, and which one do you grab on your turn. Then the game like starts to explode as we play it, because we start to have new options of what we can do on our turn. And it is, I think, like it's a weird worker placement game where we have a single worker. And like not every turn do we actually place the worker. Sometimes we do the tender, and so we don't move our worker, but we do have a worker token that we can place on a building and get some function. And like one of the things we can do by placing on a building is we can build more buildings with the resources that we have. But this ends up giving us additional functionality. So the game doesn't start small, but it starts with gathering resources, but we're limited in what we can do. And then as we build more buildings, the things that we do start to expand quite a bit. And then we have a lot of races to kind of like grab certain buildings that we want. And some of it is kind of, as Dimitri was saying, almost like a form of cooperation, that we're bringing new capabilities in that are available for everybody. But you also can be rewarded. People that come to your buildings generally have to pay you to use them, and the fee is different depending on the building. Some of them have none, some of them the more significant. I think this type of mechanism would have already been present in Kalis. It's just kind of like taken to a new level. Like you're building new action spaces. The buildings in this game are new action spaces that you can take, and if you take it for yourself, you don't pay for it. It's also the case that when you are on one of these spaces, no one else can go there. And so there is a lot of there's a lot of blocking. There's both racing to do certain things, and then once you're on a space, sometimes you're incentivized like not to leave it. Not that you're even getting additional benefit from it, but you're gumming up the works of what other people want to do. And so like it still kind of feels like a unique place for this, and I feel like different people play this game, and like it's nice bringing Paul into this game now, because maybe I'm just perceiving it, but I feel like Paul is making a number of his moves based upon what he thinks I want to do, and he's often right. Like he's right in front of me in the turn order right now, and it's often the case that Paul is doing the thing which is denying me the thing that I want to do. So one of the real strengths of the game is like I'm involved in what's happening on other people's turns. I can't just be head down playing multiplayer solitaire, because the thing I want to do is likely to change by the people right in front of me and what they choose to do.
This game has a lot in common with Newsford, and especially in one sense that, unlike all other UVA games, this isn't this sort of Baroque point salad scoring at the end where sheep are 4, horses are 2, stables are 5, a room is 3 points. Like this, you pull out this whole chart and this is literally who has the most money in front of them. You win. Newsford, I think, is the only other game that does that. This is cash in hand. Whoever makes the most money at the end of the game wins, and your buildings are worth their value. So that is just straight up money. Mm-hmm. And that's a very big difference between all other UVA games, I think, and this and Newsford, which are both his his game is about
There are
boats.
certain interactions among buildings and bonus points that you can get with a little bit of set collection, with a little bit of special qualities. But you're right. It's the easiest scoring Uber game, and
Yeah, and it's very clear who's
yes.
winning, usually. Although there are two very distinct strategies in this game, and there are one of the nice things about a game that came out in 2008. There are thousands of pages of strategy on BGG of people discussing this, and this is a game that is played at a very high competitive level. This and Agricola are his two most tournament worthy and played games.
Right.
And
he's kind of
yeah, I
moved
mean,
away from that now. I think, like, I don't think he's as interested
yeah.
in that.
Yeah, no, this is not a sandbox game at all. I mean, this is, are you going building or shipping? And may the best man win, or may the best woman win. It is, it's, and you can't just do one, but you're definitely going to be focusing on one for most of it. And it's to me, this feels like, almost like this would definitely appeal to an 18xx gamer in that there are distinct phases of strategy. There are, the opening salvos, there are your, people sort of getting their engines going, building up, and then there's a point where all the track is laid, all the trains are bought. Who's going to run their routes the best now? I mean, you definitely hit a point in that, last 3 or 4 rounds of the game where all the buildings are bought. That's it. This is the land we have now. Like, who got ready for this the best? Who's prepared most for shipping? Who's got all their coke? Who's got the right ships and the goods to ship them? Who owns the buildings they need in order to lock them out from other people? And it becomes this very elbowy, mean, dangerous dance that you do in those last few turns. And it feels like very similar to me to the end of an 18xx, where it's almost like, all right, let's get the book out here and let's run the numbers and let's see who's going to ship the most. And then, that.
But that dangerous dance happens in the context of an extremely functional and polished euro, when everything is precisely calibrated. And we're not talking about a single mechanism. We're talking about multiple mechanisms that mesh together. And we're talking about small turns and like 30 of them. And you feel like the game is just long enough and just big enough to accomplish what you should be able to accomplish. It's precision engineering. This is BMW. This is Porsche, and it's very unique for you. I'm glad to hear you say that, because I'm not as big a fan of you as you are. But I really felt that this is a game that he moved away from. That this is a game that had more influence on other designers, like the designers of City of Big Shoulders, or even the designers of Great Western Trail, and that Huey himself moved into a more sandboxy, as you say, a more uniquely worker placement, where you have a lot of decision trees, like Feast of Odin, like Fields of Arle, that I don't like, but this game I really appreciate.
Paul, you famously have been described. You famously have described this game as your kryptonite. It's a game that I would imagine you've played dozens of times, many, many, many times for many, many, many years, and it always gets a big laugh whenever anybody brings it up, because it's famously known as the game that you are bad at. And I'm not making that judgment. I'm just saying that's the trope in our group when it comes to this game and you. But you also are a player who thrives off interaction. And I actually, if somebody asked me, does Paul like this game? I wouldn't necessarily know how to answer. So I'd really like to hear from you what it feels like, to play Le Havre, and especially your specific experiences with it.
Well, first, I think Kryptonite, although is apt, it implies that I'm Superman. I would say that like I would say like I'm just a normal person, and this is like a knife to my throat. Because
Why specifically Le Havre? Because you are a very strong Euro player,
yes,
and this is a very, this is a straight up Euro game. Like, why is this one tough for you?
and I've thought about this for a while, and it could be a great many things. Like, first thing is, for something like this, I tend to prefer a map, of some sort, like it's something to visual see. But like because it's just a bunch of cards and buildings, and there's no real board, for whatever reason, that gums up my thought process. Uh, Another thing is the game is actually, at least the way I see it, and I don't see it perfectly. You decide how you're gonna play at the mid game,
Mm-hmm.
and I think in a way I'm
Or
not
it's decided for you in the mid game too.
exactly, and I'm for whatever reason am not one to really want to submit to that. You grab a bunch of pieces, and then in the mid game you go like these pieces can translates to more buildings or more ships, and the food is going to get you if you don't deal with it, which is happening to me right now, and it's probably something that I always feel like I'm close to understanding it, but not near grasping it. Does that make sense? It's like I can touch it with, like here, like for example, there are many times in this particular game that we're playing now, I go like, oh, and Trey's going to do this, and Matt's going to do this, and I have no good options. I always feel like I'm like behind, like in front of the wave as it crashes, whereas like people who are good are actually riding the wave, and there's in a way this game is very timing based, and if you fight the timing of the game, you're going to get crushed. But my specific way of playing, I almost always want to adjust tempo or try something that is probably less conventional, and in learning, not even like playing. Like I don't feel like I have a full grasp of it, but every deviation from like, I don't want to say standard play, but like the set meta proves to be 100% wrong for me. Like it's I always feel like I'm fighting underwater.
That's really interesting and apt, because I had an epiphany this weekend while playing this game quite a bit, both with you guys and also against the AI, and solo on my own. The closest analogy to me to this game in the movie is the movie Moneyball, which is one of my favorite movies of all time. And I don't like baseball at all, but it is an absolute masterpiece. To me, Moneyball is a story about somebody who has an idea and they believe in the idea and no one else believes in the idea, and they are going to lose for 90 games in a row and then win forever after that. But for those 90 games, it's going to hurt and it's going to suck and you're going to doubt yourself. That to me is almost every turn in Le Havre, where you're going, I'm just not going to worry about my fish right now. I'm going to take loans. It's going to look bad.
Yep.
I don't know what it's going towards, but I'm stocking up on steel. I'm stocking up on clay. I'm stocking up on wood. Oh my God, Trey has 40 points. Paul has 60 points. I literally have -7 points. This isn't going to work. This isn't going to work. Oh my God, I shipped. I have 200 points. I won the game. That's an experience of Le Havre.
It's a exercise in faith. In some ways.
Yeah, it is. It is. That to me is like, and I don't think there's any other game that really feels like that. Maybe 18xx to a certain extent, because it's like you can be in such a hole, but as long as you really stick to this thing, and if you believe it's going to work and you see it, you can pull something out that looked odd. And also, it's one of those, this is notoriously a game that a person who's played it 100 times and someone who's played it once, you are going to have the most unenjoyable game of your life. There's going to be a 300-point differential between your scores. Like this is not Feast for Odin, where like if I played it 10 times and you played it once, I'll beat you by 30. Like you are going to have the worst 3 hours
I
of your
want to
life.
make a small point here that not all the buildings are available at the same time. And the order in which the buildings become available is random. So,
Right.
It's a setup issue.
And
so
there is variability in this game.
And it's not that the experienced player will win because they have a bulletproof superior strategy. It's because they're able to move with the punches and tactically adapt to what's coming in a way that's better than a less experienced player. Like,
and there's also just of game knowledge of knowing that, well, what ships for the most? Coke and steel. So you need to have a plan for Coke and steel. Don't waste your time trying to ship bread and furs. You're going to lose to the Coke and steel person. And those are just things of just getting to know them. And like, you can't let one person get both wharfs, and which we did in the last game, and it proved very bad for us. You can't let one person get both wharfs and the cokery and the colliery and the abattoir. It's gonna be bad.
Was that Trey's game? Did you win that game, Trey?
Yes.
Oh, by 100 points. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, there are certain buildings in this game that are the key buildings, that are buildings that you guarantee every player who knows what they're doing will visit that building at least one time. Guaranteed. Or they were not competitive unless they build it. So people are racing for those specific buildings. So, there's not perfect information in the game. There are 6 cards in the game that are the special buildings that are going to come out from a face down deck. But other than that, it's all perfect information. Everybody knows. The only variability in the game is the order the goods come out on the harbor during the first round, and also the order of the cards from the buying rows. But once it's revealed at the beginning of the game, the flop, so to speak, where you get to see every building that's out there, then pretty much, other than 6 random buildings that come in that on a game-to-game basis may or may not have any effect on the actual game at all, it's pretty. There's no real surprises that are going to come out throughout the game.
I don't think I agree that like your first time playing this is so miserable. I think it's entirely possible you will lose badly, but it is. We played plenty of board games where you feel like there's nothing I can do. You're constrained, and like you get to the point where like in Age of Steam you can just be like, I'm dead, and there's like I can't even afford to do anything. I'm completely in a straitjacket. Le Havre's not like that. It's just that other people are going to be. I don't think they're going to be much more optimized. People are going to out optimize you, and you're still like, if you have a bad game, you're still going to score some points and you're going to do some things.
My retort to that is like, I've had my 3 worst experiences playing an initial game have been Agricola, Le Havre, and Age of Steam. As far as and all of these require some play, and all of them are very deep, and all of them are among my favorites. Let me rephrase. I love Age of Steam. That's probably my favorite of the 3. And I respect Le Havre, and I respect Agricola. But suffice to say, you can have a terrible first game. Especially you pick fish.
I think it's almost what you were speaking to, Paul, of there are a lot of feel bad turns in this game. Even when you're playing optimally, there are turns that just feel bad, where it's like, yes, I'm taking 5 clay. Yes, that's the best move. But I have no idea. I'm not feeding I'm not feeding this turn. I'm gonna take another loan. It just feels bad. It feels stressful. It's like you're accumulating debt. You have this long-term plan for it, but you don't necessarily have any short-term solutions. And the worst thing you could do is, which is the joke that we always say about Paul, is take fish, right? Like you have no engine. You need to feed 6 fish, or you're going to take a loan. The casual player will think, well, I'm going to take 6 fish. But that's literally the worst thing you could do, because you have not solved your problem at all. You've just put a Band-Aid on a giant gash in your forehead.
You haven't taught yourself to fish. You just gave yourself a fish.
Yeah. you've survived this round, but now all you've done is just lose a turn because you've not solved your problem at all for next round. You're going to have a worse problem next round, and you're not building any engine.
And so for people who are really not great at this game, the one thing that I would say consistently I find that I keep on doing is trying to avoid debt. And that's a mistake.
Don't bother. Yeah.
Like whereas in like Age of Steam, for example, you need to mitigate debt. Like you're going to have to take some, and you're going to have to like control how much you take. Whereas this game, you actually want to take debt because debt can easily be removed. Easily,
and it will save you an action of some. You can use that money as entry fees for other buildings too.
And so the real trick of it in the beginning is to spend enough that you can take debt, because if you play it wrong, you'll just make enough so that you lose all your money, but you don't take debt, and so you really haven't progressed your setup. I think when I look at what TREY does, for example, or Tom, or anyone else who's better than me, which is everyone,
except me,
like they you're doing well enough now too. They sacrifice a little bit of a piece of paper of debt in order to create infrastructure. And if you chase trying to be solvent and neglect infrastructure, you wind up having unenjoyable games. But like it's really hard to just accumulate debt if that is not within your mental portfolio.
Which is actually very thematic, because in Age of Steam, all the American railroads went bankrupt at the end of the 19th century, but French shipping is still enjoying cheese and wine and socialized medicine.
Let's move into our final thoughts here. Dimitri, I'm going to go to you last because this is your game, and I want you to end this segment. But TREY, let's start with you. I'd really like to hear, you've been playing this game since 2008. You love Uwe Rosenberg. You've played this, I don't know, 50 to 100 times probably. I would love to hear your 2020 review of this 2008 game.
I feel like it still holds up. I went back and checked Game Brain. We have this as our 35th best game, and then Matt, you and I were the ones who actually put it on our top 20 lists. I think it was your 9th favorite. It was my 11th.
And it was my number one for many years. I remember I would tell people it was my favorite game.
Yeah, I think it's still holding up pretty well for me. Like maybe I'm just like more aware of like where he's gone, because like he decided to move away from this model, but he almost like can't help himself in that. Like Uwe Rosenberg, like we're playing board games. Board games are supposed to be fun, and yet his games create stress on so many different levels. Like he has these things where like you have to feed your people. If you don't, you're going to take debt, and then you're going to pay interest on your debt. And so like every single round in this game, and there's 20 rounds in this game, like we have to feed our people, and so you're always
20
like,
times.
20 times. 20 times
in a 4-player game.
Yeah, you have to feed your people. And it's like, and strangely that it still ends up being kind of like fun, but like these stressors are a big part of his game. And even now that he's moving away from that, like you don't, like I think Feast for Odin was the last time you like had to feed your people, maybe. But
yeah,
like when we play Hallertau now,
well, in Hallertau you have to feed a whole village now, or else you're going to lose.
Well, you've got all these like mini contracts in order to move your community center, and like the game can feel like I'm just paying my bills, like I'm falling behind. Like other people are paying their bills better than I am. That's why Bruce is winning, is he's really good at paying his bills, and like that's a funny thing that like some of our favorite games have these kind of negative stressors. I do think one thing, like and you were kind of pointing towards it, like you were saying, like there's 2 strategies in this game. I'm not sure there's even 2. Like I think ultimately this really is about like getting to steal, getting to steal. One, like you're going to do stuff with steel, you need to get to steal, and like your buildings help you get to steal, and the buildings are not especially well balanced. I don't think it matters that much, but there are definitely bad buildings in this game, and there are good buildings, and like you need to play the game multiple times to kind of know, these buildings are like the key buildings, and you need to prioritize. Like you really need to be jockeying for these things in a hard way if you want to play the game competitively. So I'm not sure that that's great. Like there's a lot of games where we look at it and say like there's many different strategies, and like these different strategies can be valid and they'll be very different. You can, zag when other people are zigging and be successful. I'm not sure that's true of this game. It's more like we all need to get to steal, and we're elbowing each other out of the way as we try to get there. As a final thought, we've been playing this game asynchronously, and I think it's been pretty good. I think it played much better at 3 asynchronously, but I'm not sure this is actually a great game for asynchronous because the turns are like too small. I think like we've played some Through the Ages. Through the Ages is a better asynchronous game because the turns are meatier. Like here, like we're waiting.
It is hard to remember your strategy. I do find that. Like I come to it, I'm like, right, what was I doing? I had a whole plan. Yeah.
But we're also like like we're gonna have 20 rounds in which we have to feed our people, and we are often hung up with like, please, Paul, feed your people. You're like, we're waiting, kind of thing. I can't take my turn until you feed your people. So like it's all like the turns in an in-person game would be fine, but asynchronously it's a little too start and stop.
They're long. It takes a long time to complete an asynchronous game of Le Havre. That being said, the app is solid. It does its job well. I don't have too many complaints. DMITRY had some issues with it, and I'd love to hear from him on that when we get to his finale on here. But yeah, I'd say this is one of the better ones. Yeah,
I can't think of another. Like this game has a weird thing, which is that you have asymmetrical rounds in this game. The way it works is like there's going to be 7 turns every round of the game, and we're playing 4 people, and so like we go through our turns. Paul, TREY, DMITRY, Matt. There are times where your entire round is a single action. And like that's
right. Yeah. That happens like every 4 or 5 rounds. Yeah,
every fourth round. But it's a weird thing where you have these asymmetrical rounds, and I don't know if I've seen that so much in other games.
Yeah, and that can be frustrating too if you miscalculate that and realize that you're not going to go again before the end of the round, and you just.
I really needed to build that ship, and now I can't. Yep,
exactly. Paul, review Kryptonite.
It's a remarkable. It's like a Swiss watch. The gears kind of all go together, and like if you can get the gears to work perfectly, you have something that will last a lifetime. I definitely respect it. This feels like the Swiss watch that was on the wrist of the murderer of my father. because like although I respect the watch, like I feel it stabbed me in the heart for so many times that I have so much baggage associated with this. Like every single thing is like I can't play it perfectly because or at least even well because there's so much baggage associated with it for me. But like if I were to divorce my feelings, which is remarkably easy for me to do because I'm a robot, you have to respect it. Like it all works well. Like some things like the fact I think Trey's right. I think you have to go for steel, like that you or have some way to get steel and have some mechanisms to go towards that. And all the buildings are not equal, but I don't think this game is meant for people to come together and try it once and go, oh, let's see. I think this is a game of study. Mm-hmm. And I think if you approach it that way, I think it can probably be very rewarding. The same way that Age of Steam is, the same way that Agricola is. And really, like I'm a person who really enjoys social interactions. This game does not have that as much, But what it does do is it really puts people, if you're playing at a good level, it pits people against each other in a way that I haven't actually experienced in a lot of games. Like, there are things that are similar, but like this one, for whatever reason, hurts more.
Mm-hmm.
It hurts more, and I'm a person who probably enjoys a little more full contact feeling punching. So I respect this. I'm not good at it. I can't say I love it, but like if it were to come out, my biggest what you call it, my biggest compliment to it is if it were to come out 2020 and you were to play this, I go like, oh, this is a lot of things. This is a really good game. Blah blah blah. If you erase the emotional damage, I think this would come out and it would be, a very, very good game, highly praised.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm going to keep my thoughts brief because obviously I love this game. But one thing that's clear is that board games today, especially heavy Euros, are much more designed for a good first play, and a very good second play, and a very good third play, and often a very good fifth play, but not necessarily a great 10th play. This comes from an era where I think board games weren't as concerned about the first play or the first 2 or 3 plays, because this is a game that is great on its 10th play and great on its 30th, 50th, maybe even 100th play. I think this is a game that you could have in a small collection and always play it. It demands a lot of play, but I do think it gives back what you put in. I have been playing this game for 11 years now, and I'm still kind of in awe of it and love it. The last time like a modern Euro came out that I felt this way about was Barrage. Was like where you're playing it and you're like, oh wow, I could be playing this forever. Like this, there is so much to explore here, but also like just the moment to moment decisions are agonizing decisions in this game, which is so funny because it's a micro turn, but they hurt like a major turn. Like every decision is so agonizing. But yeah, this is a 10 for me. This is a 10. This is one of the few 10s that I've ever played. Dimitri, take us home, baby.
The two adjectives that I would use to describe this game, building on what you guys are saying, are timeless and uncompromising. And this is a game that isn't just tough on the players, but I really feel that Uwe was uncompromising on himself and stretched himself as a designer to do things that made them uncomfortable, like use other mechanisms than worker placement. And he really achieved something, and then he stepped back from it. But this is possibly a platonic ideal of a Euro. I really think that if you're a fan of Euros, you should play this because not only will you find it challenging and rewarding and incredibly painful and frustrating, which is why I did not include it in my top 20. Because I'm a sensitive and soft soul. But this is a game that is so solid and like so Webster's definition of what a Euro should be that it's almost a gateway game. If you play this, you can pretty much master almost anything else that's out there. And this is not a very tough teach. This is like half the teach of Barrage, I think.
Yeah, I agree. I would still call this a heavy Euro, though. To me, this is almost like the quintessential heavy Euro in a lot of ways. But which is interesting because it is an easy teach, but I think it's very complicated to understand as well.
Well, yes, but it's an easy teach. You always have choices. You're always doing something. There's a lot of things that inexperienced players or lazy players like me are afraid of. And this game does not really do that. This game punishes you in terms of not letting you have the optimal choice a lot of the time, but it never leaves you no choice at all, like happens all the time in Age of Steam. Or Agricola, for that matter.
Yeah, that's true. There's always something that feels like you're furthering your goals, as long as you're not.
And I want to say that if this is your first time playing Age of Steam, the iPhone is not a good idea. It just, too much information is compressed. But I actually feel that the app works really smoothly. It's much better than any BGA that I've played, and BGA is my gold standard. It froze a couple of times for me. I don't like how the pop-ups work, but I assume on an iPad it's beautiful. It's not the way to play it, but for $6.95, it's possibly the way to learn, so that when we can play again, we can really come out bruised and bloody.
Yeah, it plays great on iPad. I don't mind it on a phone. I do agree it is small, so but it may be if you have one of those big iPhones or big Samsungs, it doesn't look so bad. It requires Game Center, which is Apple's proprietary online game service. It's not super easy. You can't just like join an online game with strangers. You have to add friends through Game Center and invite them and do it like that. So there are a lot of apps that make it very easy to get online games. This does not. The app works fine. Just for the consumers out there, this is a sold out board game. The print is sold out at the moment. It's not hard to find used copies if you're dying to as well. But yeah, try the app first. I think it's $6.99, $7.99, one of those. The app's been around for 8 years. It's not very well supported anymore, but there's really nothing wrong with it, so there's nothing to really fix. For $2, you can get the small expansion, which is Le Hambo, which is just a deck of extra special cards. If you want to spend $2 on it, go for it. You maybe will see a couple of those cards every 20 games. Not a big deal either way. I own the expansion in real life, and I just throw them in with the rest. It's just a couple extra special cards. And again, you only see about six of those cards every single time you play, and there's like a deck of 40 already in the base game. Ideal player counts, wouldn't recommend 5. I think it's a little crazy and probably be 5 hours. Not horrible though. We've done it. Great at 2, great at 3, great at 4. If you're just a solo player, you can do a lot better with Uwe solo games. I would not recommend this as one of his best solo games. It's a pretty bog standard, beat your score, learn the game kind of solo. But yeah, if you're just a solo gamer, this is not the Uwe solo game. You want to look towards Feast or Nusfjord or Glass Road. That's it. Anybody else want to chime in with anything we forgot to mention?
Nope.
All right, we're good. Moving on. Hey, if you enjoyed that video, you very well might enjoy the other videos you now see being suggested to you on screen. Also, we'd greatly appreciate it if you could like, share, or subscribe to our Game Brain channel. Thanks so much.